Good evening, I'm Jose Cardenas. Find out how money from a lawsuit settlement against Sheriff Joe Arpaio will be used to establish a new ASU student journalism program that covers immigration and border issues. Plus, the U.S. Supreme Court clears the way for dreamers to get driver's licenses, and we'll talk about a new book focusing on the legacy of Burton Barr. All this coming up next on Horizonte.
Funding for Horizonte is made possible by contributions by the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station.
Thank you for joining us. This week, Arizona State University announced that Phoenix New Times founders Jim Larkin and Michael Lacey will use proceeds from a lawsuit settlement against Sheriff Joe Arpaio to establish a new journalism faculty position for border and immigration issues. The $2 million gift will go toward creating an endowed chair at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication. Joining me to talk about this is Chris Callahan, Dean of the Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication. Dean Callahan, thanks for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me on.
A lot of publicity this week about the gift, most of it focused on the source, and we kind of already indicated that. It's from a settlement of a lawsuit that these two gentlemen had against the sheriff. Even the sheriff thinks this is a good use of the money. What actually are you going to use it for?
Well, there's a huge need in both journalism education and in journalism to do much more sophisticated coverage of issues surrounding Latinos and the border. I will tell you, journalism schools in general have done a really poor job, I think, of covering these issues and of training and teaching young people how to cover these stories with nuance and sophistication and depth and objectivity. And this gift, along with a new Southwest Borderlands Initiative professorship that the university is funding, we're going to be able to bring in two new very well-known Latino journalists to start a program that will both cover these issues and to teach students in both languages.
Now, I've read the description of the kind of people you're looking for, and it seems, quite frankly, rather ambitious. You want somebody who's really fluent and fluid in both cultures, both languages, who can really talk about Latino issues and borderlands issues that involve both countries. How are you going to find that person?
Absolutely. Well, I have to say we've had a lot of great success at ASU recruiting some fantastic faculty members. So I'm quite confident that we're going to be able to find some nationally recognized journalists who fit all of those parameters.
And what will they actually be doing? The press release has said this is the first of its kind in the country, which comes as a little bit of shock, particularly in Southwest Los Angeles and everything. You'd think that wouldn't be the case, but it is. What are they going to be doing that's so different from what you're doing right now?
Sure, and to start off there, we actually have a terrific Borderlands specialization now, led by Rick Rodriguez, who was the former executive editor of the Sacramento Bee and the first Hispanic president of the American Society of News Editors. What we're doing with these two new positions is adding them to Rick to create this very powerful cadre that is not only going to cover these issues in much more depth through all of our professional programs, and some of which you'll be seeing about a year from now on Arizona PBS, but then again to focus on the bilingual education. Jose, there are 106 journalism schools in the United States, accredited journalism schools. None of them have a deep specialization in Spanish language news, and as you know, that's an enormous area of growth, not just here in Arizona, but nationally.
So right now, the school does offer its services. You see Cronkite News Service, stories are on national TV and so on and so forth. Will you be doing the same thing in Spanish?
Exactly right. And with these new faculty members, we're going to be producing these kinds of stories in both languages on all platforms.
Now, what does it mean for the school itself? You're already one of the top-ranked journalism programs in the country. What does this do in terms of enhancing the status of the school?
Well, I think, hopefully, it shows the world that we're serious about coverage of these kinds of issues, and that we're forward-looking, that we're looking at an area that needs significant help and needs these kinds of journalists to be produced by a leading journalism school, and there's no place better than here at ASU in the Cronkite School.
And in a way, is that partly because, and this will be my last question for you, Arizona has been described as ground zero on the immigration debates and a lot of other issues related to relations between Hispanics and Anglos. Is that good or bad? I mean, does that make this more important, more controversial, or what?
I think it makes it more important, but at the end of the day, it's who is our audience. And today, more than 30% of the Arizona population is Latino. This is a growing part of our audience, so therefore the coverage should be more and more extensive.
Dean Callahan, thanks for joining us to talk about this exciting new opportunity, and best of luck.
Thanks, Jose.
To find out more information about what's on Horizonte, go to azpbs.org and click on the Horizonte tab at the top of the screen. There you can access many features to become a more informed Horizonte viewer. Watch interviews by clicking on the video button or by scrolling down to the bottom of the page for the most recent segments. Learn about more specific topics like arts and culture and immigration. You can also find out what's on Horizonte for the upcoming week. If you would like an RSS feed, a podcast, or you want to buy a video, that's all on our website too. Other features include our collection of website links and a special page for educators. While you're there, show your support for Horizonte with just one click. Discover all that's on Horizonte. Visit azpbs.org, Horizonte today.
The U.S. Supreme Court denied a request by Arizona Governor Jan Brewer to block an appeals court ruling that allows young, undocumented immigrants with deferred deportation status to get driver's licenses. Joining me to talk about this is Seth Draper, an associate with the Salvatierra Law Group. Seth, welcome to Horizonte.
Thank you for having me.
The decision, probably not much of a surprise. The Supreme Court decided that they're not going to do anything about the decision that the Ninth Circuit rendered. Tell us what this means at this point in time.
Right. So the U.S. Supreme Court refused to grant the stay for the injunction. What this means pragmatically is that the Circuit Court of Appeals can allow U.S. District Court Judge Campbell to issue the injunction to stop Arizona from not giving these driver's licenses to people who have received deferred action for childhood arrivals, or more popularly called the DREAM Act.
So just kind of to review the status of all this, you had the president's executive order that said these people can stay in the country, they're eligible for federal employment identification. Under Arizona laws that existed at the time, that entitled them to a driver's license. The governor said no, and then the litigation started. Initially, the judge said, the trial court judge said, they're entitled, he thought, ultimately to an injunction that would allow them to get licenses. That goes up. Ninth Circuit rules. The governor didn't accept that as the final decision and tried to get the Supreme Court to do something different.
Right, that is correct. So what happens for all these people who get the deferred action is they receive a federal ID card, and it has specific codes on it. This happens for all aliens who are present in the United States with federal permission to be here. What then Arizona decided to do was these people who received the codes pertinent to deferred action decided that only those aliens would not be eligible for driver's licenses. Governor Brewer decided to keep going with that and moving it up to the Supreme Court, and this was her last chance to be able to get a stay of this preliminary injunction. However, this is not the end of the lawsuit. The Supreme Court could still grant certiorari to hear the case. If they decide to, which they would only need 4 members to agree to hear it, they would hear arguments probably this summer of 2015.
But that's a long ways off. In the meantime, the state is going to have to issue licenses, is it not?
Right. Probably not right away, because once again, we're going to have to see it come back down through the lower court systems. We're going to have to wait for the actual order to issue from Judge Campbell, and then Arizona Department of Transportation is going to have to give out that advisement and regulations itself internally so that these people will start being approved for driver's license.
When do we expect that to happen?
Probably 1 to 2 weeks.
Sometime after the first of the year.
Hopefully, yes.
And so we'll have these people driving. The governor talked about a parade of horribles, bad things that might happen. The courts didn't seem to be too impressed with that.
No, because I think a lot of the people who are named specifically in the suit, even though it's a class action suit for all people in Arizona, there are a few individuals named specifically. They're small business owners. They're your math teacher at high school. These are responsible people with families that are working, and enabling them to drive lets them get to work, generate income, pay their taxes, allows them to get food for their U.S. citizen children. It allows them to be full members of our society.
Last question, because you've already indicated that this is technically not necessarily the end of this. They may be able to drive their licenses. There'll still be proceedings in court. They ultimately could lose either district court or on appeal, or eventually the case might get back to the Supreme Court. When would we likely see that, and what is your expectation? What do you predict is going to happen?
Well, definitely in 2015, we'll be able to see the end of this litigation, and I expect we'll see something favorable. Judge Campbell was very quick to state his opinion. When it went up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, it was a panel 3-4-0 against. And when they applied for the stay for the injunction with the Supreme Court, only 3 justices said that they would have granted the stay, which will not be enough for them to eventually win if they even do hear arguments. And if the Supreme Court refuses to grant certiorari, I mean, that'll be the end. It'll come back down and we'll see a resolution of this favorably.
So final word then, you think that at the end of the day, this is going to hold up and these kids will be allowed to drive?
Right.
Thank you so much for joining us on Horizonte to talk about this ruling. Pretty momentous, at least for those people who are.
It's a great victory
for
for all the dreamers, and a great victory for Arizona to be able to including these members of our society.
Thank you so much for joining us to talk
Thank you for
about it.
having me.
Horizonte, we want to hear from you. If you have comments, story ideas, or questions, email us at horizonte@asu.edu.
Over the past decade, some legislative watchers may at some point have mentioned how much the state misses the leadership and big picture vision practiced by Burton Barr. A new book, Burton Barr, Political Leadership and the Transformation of Arizona, talks about the legacy of Burton Barr. Here to talk about the book is Richard de Uriarte, former columnist with the Arizona Republic, who is now the communications manager for Maricopa County, Alfredo Gutierrez, former state legislator, and the author of the book, ASU professor Philip Vandermeer. Gentlemen, thank you for being on the show to talk about truly one of the giants of Arizona government, Arizona politics. Professor Vandermeer, tell us, how did the book come to be?
I was interested in Burton Barr as soon as I got to the state in 1985, and I had recommended to a graduate student that she do research on him. She told me that she had met with Jack Feaster and Brent Brown, and Jack had offered all of his research to her.
Both of them, in their own right, giants of Arizona politics.
Absolutely, absolutely. That project didn't come anywhere, and after Jack's death, his daughter Suzanne was interested in continuing this, and so I was invited to take over his work. And I was fortunate that he and Brent had done about 37 interviews, and so that was a core part of the research I did on the book.
Richard, the title talks about the transformation of Arizona, and certainly he had a role in transforming Arizona, but it's also the transformation of Arizona that brought him to the forefront.
Well, precisely, as in the book, Phil mentions the right man, right time, right place, and that was certainly Burt Barr. The history of Burt before 1966, when one man, one vote, transformed Arizona from a rural-dominated, copper, cotton dominated economy to a more suburban situation where you had suburban Phoenix, metropolitan area where by then even, and continues, 2/3 of the population lives in Tucson and Phoenix. Before 1966, you had two senators from every county. And so that was it. That was how disproportionate it was. Across the nation, state governments have been called laboratories of democracy, but they were much more modern. Burt Barr, Alfredo, that generation of legislators transformed the state completely, installing the institutions that exist in healthcare, government, water, taxation, virtually everything.
So, Alfredo, you heard Richard several times say Burt Barr, Alfredo. That's the way people used to talk. It was Burt Barr, Alfredo Gutierrez, and Bruce Babbitt, and at least now people kind of look back on this as the golden age of politics in Arizona. You worked with him. What do you think?
Well, I think the first of all, as a human being, as a man, and as a leader, he was extraordinary. I mean, he was the energy that he simply emanated into any room that he walked into. The endless chatter that always had a point. You know, Stan Turley once said about him that he was the only man he'd ever met who could talk and think at the same time. But Burt was constantly seeking the way to pass a bill to make the state better. I was 26 years old when I became Majority Leader of the Senate, and so it very quickly evolved into a mentor-mentee relationship. I may have had a different political opinion.
A very different political opinion.
Very different. But the tools of leadership and governance, I learned all from Burt.
But you can't think of it through the prism of today's politics. This was a time where mostly it was the GI generation, like Burt, born in this century, grew to adulthood during the Depression, then went to war. Burt Barr was a genuine war hero. He commanded 3 Congressional Medal of Honor winners, and several thought he should have had it. He learned that the essence of his core of leadership style under Dwight Eisenhower, who was a personal friend, and through the military. So we have to do a goal, we have to work together, we have to respect everybody in the room, and we're making Arizona better. And during the 50s and 60s, that was the general mantra of Arizona. How do we grow? How do we become attractive, appealing, and modern?
And Professor Vanderveer, what about those tools of leadership that Alfredo was talking about? Are those the kinds of things that Richard just enumerated?
Absolutely. Politics is personal to start with, and Burt was a tremendously engaging person. He was funny, he was smart, he had a tremendous memory, he was wonderfully energetic. He engaged people, he listened to them, and he remembered. So he knew who they were, he knew their parents, he knew their children, he knew their interests, and he was always thinking about how to relate to them and how to talk about different issues to them. So I think that the leadership style was very important. He was quintessentially a legislative leader, somebody who understood transactions and negotiation and persuasion. But he also understood how to transform leadership, and I think that really is one of the things that makes him really special. He was not just engaged in doing deals, he was also engaged in sharing credit, in helping other people work, and in mentoring others. He was someone who mentored Republican leaders, but what makes him really astonishing, I think, is that he was a mentor for Alfredo and for Art Hamilton. He reached out to them.
And Alfredo, what comes out of the book, I think, is very well done by Professor Vandermeer, is not simply that he was a great leader, But he accomplished things of great importance to the state of Arizona.
Well, he transformed the state. When I say he transformed the state, he certainly was the driving force. I mean, there was a period of 10 years when Governor Babbitt was an extraordinary a guy with a great vision. When we worked together, the three of us, but without a doubt, Bert was the driving force. And when we talk about the infrastructure of the state, be it Arizona State University, recall Arizona State University at that time wasn't even a Research One institution. It was transformed by Burton Barr, and it cost millions of dollars to make it happen. Something that is it would be impossible today. But freeways, airports, the infrastructure of the state, but more importantly, the infrastructure of governance. The state was completely redone. It was at the time that we came into influence, to office, it was a set of commissions appointed by the governor, but thereafter not controlled by the governor, that operated the state. And that would assure rural control, rural Democratic control, but it was very conservative Democrats, Tea Party Democrats.
In many ways, Bert Barr created the institutions of state government that future governors, first Babbitt and then others, used. Because prior to Babbitt and prior to the legislative reforms, the governor was just kind of an afterthought on the ninth floor, who came down and asked the legislative leaders, Harold Giss of Yuma County and other conservative Democrats, well, what do you want to do this session? And he played no part. The governors really were kind of ornamental.
And Professor Vandermeer, while we look back on those days and kind of maybe with rose-colored glasses, it wasn't all sunshine and flowers. He had some real tough battles that he had to engage in to accomplish all the things these two guys are talking about. In fact, we've got a picture on the screen right there. He looks a little concerned about what he's dealing with.
Yeah, I love the picture because I think it's really ambiguous as to whether he's feeling exhausted, frustrated, or just recharging his batteries for another battle. Legislation requires a tremendous amount of work, and clearly he was engaged in difficult efforts, and he lost sometimes. The Medicare issue in the mid-'70s was the most dramatic. He had pushed to get the bill adopted, and his caucus forced him to back off. And he then supported the caucus's position to try to repeal the legislation, and he was severely criticized for it. But his argument was that, number one, he wanted to look for another battle. And two, he was a Democratic leader. He recognized that he was not a lone individual. He had to persuade his caucus, his colleagues, to go with him.
Speaking of losses,
he passed the repeal to the Senate, and I blocked it in the Senate, and on it went for 9 years. Mm-hmm. That battle went on for 9 years before we finally agreed to what is now known as access. But it was a 9-year-long battle, and part of that battle was Bert persuading his caucus that they had to do this. They rejected him. On 2 occasions, they almost literally removed him from the majority leadership over this issue. But ultimately, he persuaded them, and ultimately we created access.
And he was very strategic. When ultimately, one of the really key issues to pass Medicaid was the counties were going broke. Mm-hmm. And Kathy Eden, who was representing the counties at that time, he didn't know her name, she tells me now, but he said, the county lady, will you come into the caucus and explain, oh, the counties are we're going broke, we're going to go bankrupt if we don't have some help to our health care. So he was strategic in creating where the votes, what persuasion, what arguments would work to get where he ultimately wanted to go. But he had, especially in the early days, a followership. Men like Bill Jaquin and DeLoss Ellsworth and Harry Bandeveris and John Pritzloff and John Hayes. These were titans in comparison to what you have as legislators, were accomplished. Bert Barr was a legitimate war hero, a great family man, and very, very successful in business. To those of us who struggle along and try to do average in all of those categories. He really was a remarkable individual, but with a deprecating self.
So Richard, since you brought up all those things, and we're almost out of time, I'm going to give you the last question. Is it possible to have another Burt Barr? Can we have somebody of his ilk? Could he be successful if he were starting out today?
I don't think so. I think it's difficult in this climate without the followers, without people willing to follow a leader.
Well, on that note, I apologize, but we're out of time. He deserves a lot more attention because he truly was a great man and meant a lot to the state. Professor Vandermeer, congratulations on a great book, and thank you all for joining us on Horizonte to talk about it. And that is our show for tonight. From all of us here at 8 in Horizonte, thank you for watching. I'm Jose Cardenas. Have a good evening.
Funding for Horizonte is made possible by contributions by the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station.